Ladies and gentlemen, in just a moment we're going to begin the funeral service of Zachary Philip Simon. Rabbi Jonathan Ginsburg and Father John Meany will be officiating. For those of you who are here, please take a moment to be sure that your cell phones have been turned off, and we welcome those of you who are joining us via live stream. In just a moment, the clergy is going to approach the family to perform the ancient ceremony of Kriya, of tearing of the ribbon. So in just a moment, we'll ask the family to rise and just come, we'll go like in a circle as the clergy approach to do the ceremony. We invite the family to rise.
Well, friends, we've come to mourn and lay to final rest Zachary Philip Simon, passed away at the age of 42. The rabbis in our tradition ask the question of how do we properly mourn someone who dies so young? It's like a candle that's burning at both ends. You start and the end goes out way too fast. In our tradition, we begin with selections from the Hebrew Bible. So we're going to call Father John to come up and recite Psalm 23. First, I'm going to do it in the Hebrew, and then you have it in your pamphlets. Father John will lead you in that, and then he'll recite Psalm 15. Mizmor leDavid Adonai ro'i lo achzar bino desha yarbitzeni al meimu nochoyin aleni. Nafshi yishovev yedcheni b'maglei tzedek lama'an shemo. Gam ke'elech b'gaytz al mavet lo ira ra ki yatayim adi. Shiv techo mishantecha hei minachamuni. Taroch lefanai shulchan neged sorai. Deshanta b'shemen roshi kosi rivaya. Achtov v'chesed yirfuni kol yemei chayai. B'shavtei Adonai la'orach yamim. Father John.
As we have that psalm in our program, why don't we read it together? Psalm number 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, thy comfort me. Thou preparest the table for me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anoints my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And now I'll read Psalm 15. O Lord, who shall dwell in your sanctuary? Who shall abide in your holy mountain? He who lives with integrity, who does what is right and speaks the truth in his heart, who has no slander upon his tongue, who does no evil to his fellow man, who does not reproach his neighbor. In his eyes, a vile person is despised, but he honors those who revere the Lord. He takes an oath even in his own harm and does not change. He does not lend money in usurious interest. He does not take a bribe against the innocent. Whoever does these things shall stand firm forever.
I want to just say one word about Psalm 23. A lot of people don't notice the part that it says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Now, to have a shadow, you need to have light. And so today, there's a lot of shadow in this room because of our deep sadness over Zach's passing. But there is some element of light which created the shadow, and we want to talk about that light today. This is considered Jewish Book Month, the month of November. I think it's because there's no other holidays, and so they did something with it. But the rabbis said that when we talk about a human being coming into this world and leaving this world, it's like a great book. We can go back to that book over and over in our minds, even as the essence of that book now abides eternally with God. But so today we want to unpack the too short but brilliant and full of life of Zach. We bury him in the week the Jewish people call Chayei Sarah, which is the way we call each week depending on the Torah portion of that week. And what's interesting about Chayei Sarah, which means the life of Sarah, is guess what happens at the beginning of the Parsha? She dies. But still, the Torah does not call it the death of Sarah, it calls it the life of Sarah. And then it has something very interesting. It says she was 100 years and 20 years and 7 years. Now, they were writing this on parchment or papyrus, which was tough to find in that period, so they didn't want to waste words. So the rabbi said they could have easily said she was 127. Why did you say that she was 100 years and 20 years and 7 years? It was because they said when she was 100, she looked like she was 20. And when she was 20, she was as virtuous as when she was 7. And as Yosi said, here we had a beautiful man who looked beautiful until the end and was virtuous and pious and wholehearted, as the Psalm 15 just said, throughout his life. I'm going to talk about him specifically in a minute, but I want to say a few words about Zach's original namesake, that all Zachs are named after originally, and that's the prophet Zechariah. Zachariah. Zachary and Zach is a little side name for Zechariah, one of the last great prophets of the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible. So first of all, the name Zachariah means God remembers. And we're pretty sure that right now they're having a nice chat, and God will always remember this Zach. But you could also twist the grammar a little bit and say it's that he remembers God, and today we remember God and God's goodness and giving us this great soul, even for too short a time. The root of Zechariah also means to remember, and something that we're all going to do is to remember this Zach. Now, this story didn't happen to me. Another rabbi told me about it, but I think it's very relevant. He was out at the cemetery on a sunny day, and there was a very old deceased lady, 106, and the great-grandchildren were running around the grave. And the 5-year-old said to the other cousins, well, there's the hole, there's the dirt, there's the sun, that's where they're going to grow grandma. And the way in which we grow Zach is by continuing to talk about him, to share his stories, We're going to do a little bit of that today, but how much can you say about 42 packed years in just half an hour? And so you have to tell stories about him, remember him, and what was essential about his life and beautiful about his life. So before I have more to say, just want to acknowledge the mourners, the loving family here today. Of course, Yosi. Now, I know people call them the Bickersteins. I guess that's a reference to some old TV show that I never saw. I guess that was because when Yosi'd get dressed, Zach would say, "Have you looked in the mirror?" But an incredibly devoted couple. And the way Yosi took care of him when he needed it these last years, basically since they met 11 years ago, but especially the last few years, just incredible. And the adventures they had together, which we'll unpack a little bit. And so our hearts go out to Yosi on this horrible loss. And to Zach's parents, Ruth and John, our deep condolences to you. You raised such a fine boy, and now to have lost him is just beyond words. And to his in-laws, Benny and Bertie, condolences to you. And to Zach's family, Addie and Mark, Nathaniel and Sarah. And to Yosi's family, Zach's sister-in-laws and brother-in-laws, Talia and Xander, David and Natalia, Gotti. To the adoring nieces, Evelyn and Grace, and nephews Elliot, Miles, Adira, Elanit, Rose, and Lily. Can't forget Oscar. Saw a lot of Oscar the other day. Quite confused, though, because they just got a new couch, and he wasn't permitted on that new couch. He could just be on the old couch, but he wanted to be on that new couch where the action was. And then, of course, we have to remember his loving mama, just loved her so much, and his grandparents, and love Yosi's Bubby. And I love the story where when she first saw him, she just sort of blushed and go, "He's so handsome." Striking blue eyes, long eyelashes, and as Yosi said, just a pretty man. And so many friends. I'll mention a few, but there's so many. You know who you are, and Yosi will mention a few others. But Kelly, like a sister, Danielle, Todd, John, Miriam, he was so well loved. So I'm going to have more to say, but first I know you'd like to hear from Yosi.
My dearest Zach, first I want to thank you all for being here, coming together, honor and mourn the incredible life of Zach Simon. The pain of losing you, Zach, is almost unbearable. What brings me strength are the countless memories that we created together over the last 11 years. You are and always will be my true love, my life partner, my confidant, and my best friend. Between Zach and I, we were so just loved by all the people, especially our friends and family. But if you knew us, you were our family. And looking at this full room today, I know that he's smiling down on all of us. I'm going off script because it happens sometimes. But I did write, I hope you're watching over us right now and feel the immense love that surrounds you, just as it always did in life and will forever in our memories. Zach, you were a shining light, grateful, gracious, endlessly kind, and driven by an unparalleled commitment to excellence in everything you did. Your laugh was infectious. It was, when he got going, he turned bright red like the lobster that he loved to eat, and everyone around him would just burst out into laughter. His presence was magnetic, and you had a way of making every conversation feel alive and meaningful. Even in the face of unimaginable challenges of battling cancer, your spirit and light never wavered. The disease may have clouded your days, but it could never, ever obscure the profound impact you had on everyone around you. I want to take a moment to thank Ruth. I need to take a moment to blow my nose because it's running. I want to take a moment to thank Ruth and John Simon for the gift of Zach. You brought him into this world, and through your love and care, especially in the last few months, you gave me the greatest gift of my life. You gave me Zach, to Addie, Nathaniel, Sarah, Tali, Sander, David, Natalia, Gotti, Elliot, Miles, Evelyn, Grace. Zach loved you guys so deeply, and I will carry that love forward, always. To our friends and family, far too many to name individually, I want to thank you for the love and friendship you gave Zach and me. To my sister Tali, who shared a special bond with Zach, and to John, Miriam, Todd, Kelly, Rookie, Anna, Rui, Tim, all of you, really. I can't go through the whole list, but you're here, and I just wish he could see you all, because he really did want to have everyone over to the house this last year to be closer, but he was prideful and did not want any of you to worry about him or to see him sick, and especially my colleagues at work, he didn't want people to meet him for the first time in a place that he didn't want to be. That's also off script. Anyway, back to the friendships. Your love mirrors the love Zach gave to the world, and I know he wished he had been healthy enough to give even more back to each of you, which is what I wanted to say, but I went off script. To my parents, thank you for your constant offers to help and to the love. And to my Stand With Us family, thank you for your unwavering support. And to Peggy Shapiro, who through leadership and guidance has been a beacon to me during these difficult times, even though I didn't have a way to articulate that. She knows what I mean. And to Oscar. Oscar and I will hold on to every cherished memory we made with Zach, and we will treasure the stories and the moments he shared with so many of you. Zach, I will love you to the moon and back, always and forever. You were and always will be my beautiful, precious Zachariah Philip Simon. Rest in peace, my love, my everything, and my forever. Thank you.
Well, you all know that Zach was very gracious. He'd always say thank you. So we all say thank you to Yosi for that beautiful portrayal. And we have to say thank you to Yosi too, because as his family said, he was an amazing caregiver, an advocate, taking such good care. The other thing that they said that Zach said a lot was, let it go. And today, sadly, we have to let him go, but only his physical remains, because, as I said, his spirit abides forever, and his memory can abide in our hearts. There's a story in the Talmud about a rabbi who said that when we face our end, we are asked several questions. And these are rhetorical questions, I think, although I'll find out someday, I suppose. Questions to help guide us in this world. And one of them is, did you do your work with integrity? And so we have to say a word about his work, as Yosi referred to. He was very modest about his work, but very accomplished, winning all kinds of awards, rising to that executive VP position. He was so passionate about what he did and so proud of it. He was mortified of a mistake, being the perfectionist that he was, but he loved being the best. He was competitive really only with himself, as we should be. Won many awards and recognized by his peers. And he didn't stop even when he was sick. He didn't want to stop. And he took Zoom calls even when he was on chemo. He was so artistic, and he did his work with integrity, and so yes, he can say, yes, I did my best. All of us have various hobbies and interests that are idiosyncrasies that make us particular, and he definitely did, and a lot of them were artistic, as you'll see. First of all, he got a degree in photography, and he continued to be a fantastic photographer. He also said they would take pictures of the same thing, and no matter how good a phone Yosi had, Zach's pictures were always so much better. He had an amazing eye, not only for art, but his photography, and that's something that we remember. I just asked his dad, is there anything that when we talked about you didn't mention, and they said, gymnastics. So I guess to be as artistic as he did and to be as flexible as he was in life, you have to remember his gymnastic days. But you know how he decided not to continue with it? I'm not going to make the Olympics, so time to move on. He also loved to garden, which I guess is part of the artistry, but he loved being outside and his landscaping magic and just trying to transform everything. He loved the process of it. He wanted to take part of it. And even he loved being outside so much that when they'd go to a restaurant and Yosi would pick it because of the ambiance of the restaurant, Jack would say, let's eat outside, it's a nice day. He didn't like to waste money on anything except antiques, but he didn't always say what the price was, but they were beautiful. And clothing, he was very stylish. I already told you the best line of when they'd be prepared to go out and he'd look at Yosi and go, is that what you're wearing? Or have you looked in the mirror? But he was able to pull off the jeans and t-shirt look with aplomb. Simple clothing that you knew just dressed beautifully. He loved adventures, the big trips every year, and they went all kinds of places: Israel, Italy, Japan, Spain, a cruise from Amsterdam to Barcelona, London. He always find boutique hotels. He didn't like the chain hotels. He found that little family hotel, the boutique restaurant. But he also loved the little impromptu trips. In fact, right before they moved to LA, rented a helicopter so they could take the city of Chicago and look at it from that point of view. Who would do that? But he did that. And then he wanted to move back to Chicago. Why? Because he knew the end was coming somehow in his heart. And he wanted to make sure that his family was near him and that Yosi would be near his family and to get him situated before he went to the next world, thinking about others all the time. That great sense of adventure, and now he's on the biggest adventure that all of us will face inevitably, which gives us pause to think about what's really meaningful in this life. He had an uncanny sense of direction, his mother said. He had this internal GPS, and I think that it's not just about finding directions on where you're going, but kind of where you're going in life. And for 42 years, he had this beautiful GPS. He had this infectious laugh, as you know. He was gregarious, and people just loved him. He was so nice to all and didn't hold a grudge. Yosi admitted that if he decided you were not the kind of person that he wanted to spend time with, he was efficient about that, like he was about everything, because there were so many people that wanted to spend time with him and that he wanted to spend time with. But if you were in that circle, you were loved, you were embraced, you were caught up. He loved music, although I got to admit, I'm not familiar with the music that he loved. I like cantorial music, what can I say? He liked electronic music, Elderbrook, whatever that is. And he loved music. And you know, think about this, he ran marathons. Even when he was under chemo and sick, he ran a half marathon. I mean, this is a guy who loved to exercise in that way. He looked like taking walks, long bike rides. That was just something that was special to him. I mentioned he loved antiques. Even through all of that, they would pop into stores on their trips. He would go into a landscaping store, they would make sure to find one. He would go into an antique store, make sure to find one. That was something that he just loved to do. His TV preferences happened to be reality TV. And I know that's kind of humorous, but one of them was Survivor. And think about that for a minute. And here's a guy, 11 and a half years, survived this horrible predicament that would knock all of us on our backs. And talk about reality TV, he lived reality life like a TV show. Amazing. Something so powerful. He loved crab. He loved the good filet mignon. He loved surf and turf. But he was so skinny, I think part of it was because of all the marathons that he ran. And so when we think about all this, the photography, the landscaping, the beautiful perfectionist work with all the awards, the clothing, the hikes, the adventures, think about how did he fit all that into 42 years, but he did, with an amazing soul. There's a story in the Talmud that goes back 2,000 years about one of our great sages sending his 5 disciples, who all became great sages on their own later, into the world to look at human virtue. And they said, come back after a year of studied humanity, and you tell me what is the single most important human virtue there is. And so after a year, and if we took a consensus in this room, we'd probably come up with the 5 things that these 5 rabbis said. And they all came back, and they all mentioned one thing. And then one of the rabbi's students said, to have a big heart. And Rabbi Eliezer said, yes, I think that's true, because if you have a big heart, it encompasses everything else you said. And here was a guy with a giant heart. And that heart fought very hard for a long time not to leave you. But as we're all mortal, we're all flesh and bone, the end has come. And so today, as we think about his life, we acknowledge that God has blessed him. We acknowledge that he lived a just and honorable life and is now at peace. We're grateful for the years we are blessed by his presence, even as we mourn his passing. And so we say in the words of our tradition, Adonai Natan, Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach. The Lord has given us this beautiful, wonderful soul of Zach, and the Lord has taken away. We praise God's name not because we're happy with what happened, but because we're happy that we had him in our lives, that we could honor him, that he could honor us, he could embolden us, that he could teach us, that he could inspire us, that we should live a better life, and we honor him in his memory by remembering him. Zachary, God remembered, and we remember, and God remembers him. May his memory always be for a blessing, and let us say, Amen. You have the pamphlets. There are two prayers in the pamphlet. One is traditionally done here, and then we'll do that again at the grave for those who are going, and then we'll do the mourner's Kaddish, which is on the back at the grave. The one that we're going to do here is the Almalei Rachamim, which is right below the 23rd Psalm. Please rise now. I'll do it first in Hebrew and then ask you to join with me in the English. Almalei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamtzei Menucha, Nechona, Taka Kanfei Ashchina, B'malot, Kedoshim Atarim, Gazor Rakia Mazirim, Et Nishmat, Zachary Philip Simon, Shalach Leolama, Began Eden, Tehei Menuchata, Anabal Harachamim Astireo Beseter Kanafecha Olamim, Usror Betzorachem Et Nishmata, Adonai Hu Nachalata, V'yanuach B'Shalom HaMishkavav, and Omar, Amen. Before we do it in English, I want to tell you two other things about the prophet Zechariah. One is that Jews traditionally pray 3 times a day, and the final prayer of each of those services is the same. It's called the Aleinu. In the end of that, it asks God, for us to help God create God's kingdom on earth. But it ends with a quote from the prophet Zechariah. Bayom hahu yiyeh Adonai echad u'shmo echad. That in one day all the people of the world will acknowledge the one God, which is the name of Zechariah. Zachariah, remember God. And the next holiday we have is the holiday of Hanukkah. And the prophetic portion selected by our sages to recite on the Shabbat of Hanukkah is from the prophet Zechariah. And not only because it highlights the Chanukiah, the menorah, that shines so brightly for the holiday and in our homes, as his light will continue to light and shine in our lives, but because of a verse at the end of that prophetic portion where Zechariah says, it's not by might, nor by power, but by the Spirit of God do all people live in peace. And it's by that Spirit, and the Spirit that God gave him, that we find shalom in our lives and in the world. Let's recite the mourners, Almalei Rachamim. O God, full of compassion, thou who dwellest on high, grant perfect rest beneath the sheltering wings of thy presence, among the holy and pure who shine as the brightness of the firmament, unto the soul of Zechariah Philip Simon, who is gone unto eternity. Lord of mercy, bring him under the cover of thy wings. Let his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Be God's possession. May his repose be peace. Amen. You can be seated.
Ladies and gentlemen, the interment service will continue at Memorial Park Cemetery, located at 9900 Grosse Point Road here in Skokie. The family will be together at the Held Simon residence at 2821 West Greenleaf Avenue in Chicago upon return from the cemetery until 7 p.m. Memorial contributions to Colin Town or Stand With Us would be appreciated. That information is on the service folder. For those of you who are joining us online, all that information can be found on the funeral home's website. For those of you who will be driving in the funeral procession to the cemetery, the procession will be forming in our parking lot Please obtain an orange safety funeral sticker to place on the right-hand side of your windshield. Have your bright lights and hazard lights on at all times. For additional measures of safety, we will be providing a car in the back of the procession to hopefully keep other cars from entering the procession. Please use your horn liberally as you're going through the intersections, and please do not speak or text on your cellular phone while driving to the cemetery. At this time, I invite those of you who have been asked to serve as pallbearers and the entire family to escort Zachary from the chapel to the hearse. Then you may return to your cars. This concludes the service.